The maker in my life was my grandmother, who passed away about 5 years ago. My grandmother was a maker because she raised 4 kids on her own, and her husband was blind, and she took care of him and while raising the kids. And she also, after he passed away, supported herself and the family by working as a secretary for a trucking company, and also by investing and working in different jobs and pretty much just doing everything herself. I know that one of the big challenges in my grandmother's life was the fact that she wasn't allowed to go to college. She was very smart, she was at the top of her class, but only her older brother was allowed to go to college. And he wasn't really as good a student, he wasn't as good a person, he wasn't as intelligent or upstanding, but because he was the boy, he got to go to college. And she, after high school, became a nurse, and instead of becoming a doctor, becoming a lawyer, one of the things she wanted to do, she had to become a nurse. But it ended up working out because my grandfather was wounded in the Second World War. He was blinded. He was in the hospital for 2 years, and my grandmother was his nurse, and that's how they met each other. For me personally, one of the reasons that my grandmother has had such an important influence on me is that when I was a kid, she was like a third parent to me, and she helped to raise me, and a lot of my earliest memories are of her. One memory of my grandmother that really sticks out from when I was a little kid was my first trip to New York City. I grew up outside of Boston in a small town, and my grandmother lived in New York, lived in Brooklyn her whole life, was born and raised and lived here. And so when I was 3 years old, it was the first time that I spent a night away from my parents, and my grandmother brought me down to Brooklyn. And I remember when we were driving down, we got to the city, it was nighttime, and she drove the wrong way on a one-way street and got pulled over by the police. And I remember her saying, "Oh, officer, you wouldn't give me a ticket in front of my grandson, right?" And she got away with it. She got off from the ticket because she knew how to play her cards. That same trip, I spent the night at my grandmother's house. I watched Jeopardy with her, watched Wheel of Fortune with her, and I remember all of it. And I remember going to sleep that night and hearing all the different sounds, like the horns and the sirens and all the different things that you hear in the city that were totally new to me as a country boy. And 25 years later now, I live in New York, and I think that those really fond early memories of her are why I live in Brooklyn, just a mile or so away from where she brought me back in those days, because it was my favorite place then and it's my favorite place now, and it's because of her.